Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode here on the SMP. In this episode, we are continuing the World Tour series that we started last week. Last week we went through the whole project and everybody else's projects. With Expelfar, we just kind of grazed through the surface level, talked a little bit about different things, made a few jokes. It was fun. This episode, we are going to do a more specific deep dive into some of my builds, specifically the ones in the town over here. And in the next episode, we will be doing a more specific deep dive in the rural area. We talk about trees a lot, I'm sure, but in this episode, we are going to be talking about a lot of buildings. I'll try to do it in a mostly chronological order, but I think there's going to be a few buildings that make sense to break that order on, such as the church. I think we should do the church first, especially since it is probably the biggest and most important part of the town, visually at least. So I think that's where we'll try to start, and we might as well just go ahead and go over there. Alright, well, actually the church was really the first thing that was built to completion in my area anyway, so it kind of makes sense to start with this in the first place anyway. It, of course, was inspired heavily by Gothic architecture, and you can see a lot of those elements like rose windows and spires and pointy arches all over the place. But if we actually go up this hill, you can also see there's flying buttresses on the roof and different things like that, which I think are really neat details. There was a few things that I did end up changing once it was in survival mode, because like most of the buildings in the town, I did plan this out in creative mode first. The main thing that I changed really was the back kind of half, I guess. Not really half, it's more like a fourth maybe, but past this point right here, this line, I just didn't have planned out in creative mode. I thought I was kind of out of space, so this point was it. Once I built it in survival mode, I figured out that I had quite a bit more space, and this kind of sudden abrupt end didn't really work out and look good, so I completely changed the back half and the interior once I got it in the server. I did plan out the change in creative mode a little bit, but I really just did it here on the server, and it was pretty interesting. Now that it's about a year and a half old, there's quite a few things that I would like to change, and there was a few things that I remember trying out really for the first time, such as shading. If you look at this central spire here, you can see that there's tuff and stone bricks in certain corners, and I was trying to kind of create the idea of shading under the arches a little bit and an angle of light coming in from this direction, and it kind of worked out in some ways, but it just isn't quite what I would like it to be, and you don't really see it anywhere else on the church other than right in here. I didn't really have too much space for it anywhere else, but I feel like in a future version of a church or whatever, if I ever build another one, it makes sense to kind of try to make more of that in a future project. Another thing that I kind of don't like the look of is this central tower being kind of out of scale. It's just a little bit too big. And it's probably because I added these decorative elements on the sides, which kind of give it another block of depth in each direction and makes it a little bit bigger. But if I probably downsize that a little bit, it would look maybe a little bit better. I'm not really sure though. I have to, see it to kind of imagine it completely. But if we go inside, there is a finished interior like there is to almost every building in the town, and you can kind of see what I was going for here with a just normal kind of church. I should probably close that gate so that the cleric doesn't get out. But if you look in here, you have a lot of pointy arches, you have a pulpit and pews and everything like that. I remember while building this, I was really trying to play with light quite a bit. You have light coming in from these windows, and that really is the only source of light other than candles and a little bit behind that cross there, which we'll get to in a second. But if you imagine light coming out of these windows, there really shouldn't be too much light in the middle here. There is a little bit of light because we have to make sure mobs don't spawn, but the way I tried to kind of carry the light out was by having a little bit more of a kind of softer transition. So if this was a regular torch instead of a soul torch behind these trapdoors, then they would look too bright and too harsh, and that would cause a little bit of a kind of just weird feel in that area where it looks like the wall itself is glowing, and I didn't really want that. I wanted it to look like the light was coming in from the windows, and I think I accomplished that in most cases, especially up on the top where the light is literally only coming in from the windows. But other places that I really played with light, of course, is the cross up here that looks like it's glowing because there's a little lantern behind it. That's it. That's the only reason why. Everything else has pretty much just enough to get by with mob proofing, and that's it. We have a few little details like these clerics. At the time, I wanted the town to basically be one big villager trading hall. Each building designated a kind of villager, and you would go in and trade with these guys. I ended up only needing one cleric, so I didn't add a bunch more into here, but we have enough brewing stands for quite a few, which would have made the place seem really chaotic. I'm glad we ended up with only one, really. If we go upstairs, you can see that you can't really unless you jump on the brewing stand. That was because the villager kept trying to climb up here and ended up being in that bell tower a lot of the time, and it kind of just didn't look right, and he couldn't get down. So you could kind of get up in this area. It's not really somewhere that you're meant to be at a lot of the time, so it's not really decorated or detailed. There wasn't much room to decorate or detail anyway, if you think about it, so um, if you go up here, you can actually get up on the roof from the bell towers and stuff, and I've been able to, you know, show you most of these details from a little bit further away with the shading and everything already, so there's not much I want to talk about. You can kind of see the flying buttresses and stuff a little bit better. But that's pretty much the church done. Alright, well, I think we're gonna just move on to the next build, which is this one, and it is also of pretty significant importance. This build was really the first one I completed after the church, and kind of set the tone for the rest of the build, and it really does a good job of that. I think it really kind of captures the idea of a small walkable town with like all these different little features and uses just happening all in one building. You have different things like bulletin boards, which kind of just serve as like little advertisements or messages to the community. You have a lot of different stuff here that I think really worked out pretty well. Before we go into the interior though, we have this mailbox that ended up really not being used much over the course of the season. I used other people's mailboxes quite a bit, but mine didn't end up getting too much mail because I was just always on the server compared to everybody else, so it didn't really end up working out. But on this side, we have a little bit of a restaurant, and I did the interior pretty much with that in mind. I guess a trapdoor was flipped there at some point, and I think it looks pretty good. We even have a little kitchen back here. There's not much I want to go in detail about the interior to that part, though. If we go around, you can even see there's like a little faint pattern on the banners, which I added it later. But we have a little bit of a lobby. We have a mail room back here that connects to the mailbox outside. The mail just automatically gets put into that barrel, which I think is pretty neat. We have a couple of rooms which are meant to look like apartments. This one has the owner in it, because it says owner. And it's just a little one bedroom, one room really apartment with a little bed, a little kitchen area, and that's it. Upstairs we have the one that I consider my room, my apartment, and it's pretty nice. I like this one quite a bit. It just has a little living room, a little bedroom, and a little kitchen, and that's it. And I really like the look of it. There's even some pretty interesting details, a lot of storage. I added a lot of barrels everywhere, like everything's in a barrel, and that was because I thought I was gonna have a lot of storage in this building, but I ended up using somewhere else as storage, which ended up working out quite a little bit better. But you have even storage back here in the closet space and a lot of stuff that I added up in here. This build, like I said, it did really serve as kind of the beginning of setting the tone for the build. It also served as inspiration to really kind of restart this project. I kind of, after doing the church and a few things here and there, I kind of just lost interest for a few months. And doing this build and YouTube kind of came together in a way that created a perfect storm to get me re-inspired and just complete everything, which is pretty significant because I really haven't completed a project in Minecraft before this. I started a lot, but never really completed any. And now I guess we're going on to talk about the general store a little bit. The general store was the next building that I did after this one, and it played a pretty significant role throughout the season of just getting me a lot of resources, because if we go up to the top here, we have villager trading call, and I traded a lot of pumpkins over the course of the season and have quite a few emeralds, all from those villagers over there. It's just pretty so that's pretty fun. I like that a lot. But if we look at the exterior, I did some more kind of interesting detail work. I started building this and I had a pretty specific idea in my head of what I wanted it to look like. So I ended up trying to make these sort of flat inset shapes that you kind of see in some old downtown buildings, and those flat shapes really aren't easy to do in Minecraft because you kind of can't inset more or less than like a full block at a time, and that kind of ended up working a little bit because I was able to add walls. Got my spyglass right here. Walls and stairs and stuff, but if you look closely, there's like just subtle reminders here and there that things aren't lining up quite right. But I think it works well enough, especially if you look at it from a distance in certain angles, that it kind of makes a little bit more sense. We of course have this little awning out the front here, this little wooden kind of thing, which I think looks nice. It gives the build a really unique feel to it. We have a little bench and trash cans and little display cases for stuff. But if we go inside, we have even more things on display. This bookshelf and stuff it was meant to look like cans. You have a little register here, and you have a little storage area out the back here, which connects outside to this kind of street that goes nowhere. I was planning on doing a little bit more in this corner. I thought I could maybe do a tree, and then I ended up feeling like that didn't really fit in. And then I thought, well, maybe I can do like a little truck in this area, but I kind of wanted to stay away from cars anyway, and really like it wouldn't make sense for how it could like fit through this area or anywhere else, because these streets are pretty narrow. So I ended up not building a car, but we have a lot of different things like hanging signs and stuff all over the place. We have, like I said, that cash register, a few different things that I think make this look a whole lot like a general store. So I guess we'll move on to something else. I'll probably sleep first, then we'll talk about the stable. This stable was not really done after the general store. There was a few buildings in between, but I felt like it kind of makes sense to break chronological order so we're not running back and forth across the city. But if we look at this little build here, we have a stable, right? It has some neat stuff going on with the roof, detail and stuff in there. The actual walls are made out of trapdoors, which makes it look really interesting in my opinion. It gives it a really unique feel compared to the rest of the builds. In the town, you have also a pitched roof, like the A-frame kind of thing going on, which you don't have on most of the builds in the town either. Most of those have flat roofs. But the stable was something I knew I wanted to build from the beginning of like kind of thinking about how the town was going to work. I wanted a stable in the rural area, which we ended up building, and then a stable in the town right in this area, which we ended up building immediately afterward. So we have two stables in like 1 or 2 episodes, I don't remember. which is kind of funny, but it was just the course of events. We have some storage for saddles and stuff in here, but most of the storage is over in the other stable. There are skeleton horses in here that me and Expelfar got one day during a lightning storm. We had channeling tridents already, and we just were like, hey, we could get some skeleton horses, so we did. There's a leather worker in here too, which would sell me saddles if I ever leveled him up, but I just didn't because I didn't need to. We have all this detail on the roof, which probably doesn't make any structural sense. I just wanted to kind of the visuals of it look pretty interesting. But that's pretty much all there is to talk about this stable. There wasn't really much done other than that, other than like a couple little bits of decoration around. So we'll go around this building here to the library next. The library was a pretty significant building from a visual standpoint. It's pretty big. And I wanted it to kind of be next to the church because I felt like that kind of just told an interesting story. But while I was building it, I actually kind of struggled just to get started a little bit after building that building right there. I wanted another one of a similar scale and shape and kind of just struggled of how to make it look unique while still like in the same style a little bit. And I ended up being inspired by a building in my hometown's downtown area, and it doesn't really look like this in any way, but it does have kind of vertical aspects to it. It has really like pillars that go in between all the windows, and those pillars were really what inspired me to kind of try and make this building. It really ended up being about these vertical lines that kind of created the look at this building a little bit better. Now, the library isn't just a library, it's also home to the cat cafe, which houses every kind of cat, including the one outside. And this was because because this was originally a village, I had a bunch of time where I was trading with villagers and a cat would spawn and I would just go over and tame it real quick. And I ended up with every kind of cat very quickly too. It was at the beginning of the season. This was my first cat, so he kind of gets a special place outside. But all these other ones still have their own different colored collars and things like that. There's one that's named. I think just this one. That one's Bad Leroy. All the other ones I don't think have names, but that one's Bad Leroy for sure. I didn't really have a name for the cat cafe. I just called it the cat cafe all season, so I ended up putting that on the sign. But there was a couple suggestions, I think, in comments at some point in time. But we do have a nice building here. We have certain details like the windows that I think stand out pretty significantly. We have different things that I was trying to do along the kind of, I guess, what would you call this, edge of the building along the street. And I don't know what this is supposed to be. Like, it kind of looks like a trash can and a recycling bin next to each other. Like, they sometimes have those. But I didn't really think about that at the time. I was just placing blocks and that looked good. And I guess I just kind of left it there. I don't really know what that was supposed to be. But if we go inside, we have a seating area and a main library area. And you can kind of see that the seating was literally just seats and tables and stuff. You have the library, which has a couple of different things going on. In here, we have a little book return that connects to the book return outside. You have different things for the reception, the librarians to check books out and stuff. If we go upstairs, we have the whole villager trading hall that I built up here with a whole bunch of librarians. Now, we didn't actually end up filling all the spaces. There's a couple spaces more for librarians to fit in, but most of it's filled up. But I didn't actually use most of these guys. I used some of them, like the mending guy, a lot, but a lot of them I didn't use because I was already enchanted once this was built. We also have a regular enchantment set up there. We have some maps of the whole area. You can see the town there, the rural area there, Expelfar's area there and stuff. And a more zoomed out map over here, so you can still see the rural area and the town right there, but there's a little bit more area around the edge that you can also see, which I think looks nice. But that's pretty much all there is to talk about the interior. There was a few things I was inspired about for the interior, but nothing really worth mentioning, nothing really specific. There's the book drop-off So I guess we'll move on to the next build. The post office was what was completed next, or roughly. And I quite like the look of the post office. There was quite a few little details I added here. Even though it is a pretty plain exterior, there was this little pattern painter, which I quite like. It looks a lot like the UPS logo. We have a little flag outside because usually post offices have flags outside. We have little things that you usually see on post office buildings, like a little sign that says the town name and post office and everything. We also have a pretty good interior in here. We have a bunch of PO boxes and different things in here, which I think really looks nice. In here, we kind of have something that might look like the back of a post office, but as I said in the episode, I really don't know what a post office looks like in the back of a post office, what that looks like. We just have certain, shelves and stuff, lights on the ceiling. I ended up building a farm just for like 6 lights, which, I mean, it worked out, but anyway. We have some details. There was a lot of intention put in the exterior of this building, even though there's not really much detail. There was quite a bit of shape that I wanted to achieve with the front of it, especially. You can kind of see that there's a lot of specific blocks used, even though it doesn't really look too interesting visually. It's just, there is something about it that just really looks nice, though. But at the same time, we also built the stable, which I like. This one wasn't planned from the beginning of the season, but I had an empty building that I didn't know what to do with, and I was able to put a stable in here, and it looked pretty good, so we just went with it. And I kind of like the interior to this one the best. We got a super duper pooper scoop here. Um, there's not much else to talk about. There's no horses in this one because there's no horses left to house. We housed all the horses in the other stables by the time we built this one, so I guess this was really just um, to fill the building, really. There wasn't really much intention in that interior, but that brings us on to the next building. Actually, it's kind of 2 buildings if you think about it, because these were done at really the same time, and they're kind of connected together, and so it's kind of 2 buildings. This one was planned out first, and the interior was done first, so I think we'll start with this one. So there's kind of a few different little details here that I did. We have the kind of ridges and shading going on to make it look like a tin roof. I didn't really do that anywhere else. Maybe kind of in a spot in the rural area that we might talk about next episode, but this texturing also was something that I really didn't do anywhere else. This build was kind of meant to look a bit more industrial, so I decided to kind of put soot or ash on some of the bricks because I felt like that kind of would fit in with the build a little bit. We have the name Joe Schmoes because I think that's funny and kind of fits. We have the interior, which is built around these 3 villagers. These are smiths of different varieties, so we have a weaponsmith, toolsmith, and a armorsmith, and there's kind of those 3 corners here that I feel like fit in together a little bit, but really they just like that one corner because there's a cliff behind here and mobs like to pathfind uphill, so they just think that they can go through there for some reason and end up on that campfire, which I think is kind of funny most of the time, but it's a little annoying sometimes whenever you want to really feel like this is the normal place. But anyway, if we go on, we can kind of look at this barbershop a little bit more closely. There is, of course, this barbershop pole thing, and it kind of looks like a barbershop pole. I don't know that it really does, but once you say that it's a barbershop pole, you're like, oh yeah, it's a barbershop pole. So I guess it works close enough. We have some fancy windows up there. Really, this build was kind of the last, so I was able to put quite a bit of detail that I just didn't put in some of the earlier buildings, and it was kind of small. So all the details are compact together, so you kind of get a really interesting look to this building. It's meant to tell kind of a story of an older building that was a little bit fancier and then kind of decayed over time, which I think it really accomplishes quite well. Inside we have a barbershop, which I think looks quite a bit like a barbershop. We have a little chair, we have a little mirror, We have a little seating spot with magazines for you to read. We have a little broom with a trash can beside it as well. I mean, we got the whole thing down here. There's a lot of detail and not much room to put it in on this bottom story. So once I got up to the top, I kind of gave up a little bit. My brain was used for the day, and so I just put a table, a bookshelf, and a bed, and called it a day. And it looks good, but it's really not something you're gonna ever look at because I mean, really, who's gonna go up there? You're gonna go into the build, maybe, but you're just gonna walk by it most of the time. You're probably not going to go upstairs. And I guess that's really one of the last builds. It was the last exterior to a building, but it's not the last interior to a building. Across the town, we have the last interiors we did over in this building. But before we get to those, it might be worth stopping to talk about the monkey statue. This statue was built actually in the location of the original well of the village, and it was one of the first things on the server that was made, and it's inspired by a meme that me and my friends quite enjoy. It was there's like a old 80s Sony Walkman commercial with a monkey, and it's a meme now, and we use it quite a bit. So that's what this was inspired by, and you can kind of see certain aspects of that if you know what I'm talking about, but you probably don't. So I'll move on to this over here. This is one of the last interiors we did, but it was one of the first exteriors, which you can kind of tell because it's pretty simple. A lot of these three buildings are. This was meant to house originally the villager breeder, and it still does. If we go up here, you can see that there's a little bit of dirt, which is actually farmland upstairs. And if you actually go up in here, you can see there's beds and stuff, which I'll actually sleep in because it's nighttime. And over in this area, you have the actual villagers. It's turned off right now because I don't need more villagers, but if we move that block, then it would be turned back on. We have some villagers in here, which I think we'll just have for spare. We have this Fletcher guy that I've not built a place for because I didn't really feel like I needed to. I never used that guy. But there is exteriors to all of this, which look pretty nice, even if they do have kind of blacked out windows or whatever. This was not really meant to be anything when I built it, but I was told it kind of looked like a bank, so I kind of ran with that and decided this is a bank now, even though it doesn't have any interior and nothing on the exterior to really indicate that. So I don't know. But this building I wanted to be a grand hotel is what I eventually decided it was going to be. So it has a little bit of a lobby reception area. It doesn't have any upstairs because of the villager breeder, but we have a little like closet in the back here. There's not really much to talk about in this build other than I feel like this looks a lot like motel art or hotel art or whatever you want to call it, and I don't know. That's pretty much all I did on this build. We put up a no vacancy sign eventually because there is no rooms, and I felt like that was kind of a little funny joke to put here. We also have the museum, which was built before the park, but it was built because I knew I wanted to put something in that park island over there. And there's really not much room in this building. There's very little room to put an interior, but I still put enough in here to kind of sell the idea, I think, especially with the sign outside. We have the maps that the library had in the past before the build was complete. We used different maps because wanted to kind of preserve the history a little bit. So you can take those maps out of those bundles and look at them. If there is a world download, I don't think there will be, actually, so you probably can't. But we did build the park immediately after that because I wanted to tell the rest of the story of why there is a museum in this town, and this park is the reason why. There's a little strange ancient site here, and there was some, local legends around it and stuff, which created a little museum shop there, and I feel like that kind of made a lot of sense. But now, I guess, because there's not really much to talk about this part, I guess I can say there's like a couple little stones and stuff. I did most of this freehand. I didn't have much of a plan in creative. kind of looks nice. I like it. But I guess, yeah, we're done with all this stuff. So the last thing to talk about really is the dock area. The docks actually ended up being a pretty significant portion of the view of the town from across the river. There's a lot of visual space that ends up being dedicated to the docks. And that wasn't planned out or really intentional because the docks themselves weren't really planned out. There was kind of just the idea that something should be coming in and out of the town so that, people and things could move in and out. And I didn't really have an explanation for that. I had a little sign here that said docks with a question mark, and that was my best attempt for a really long time. Eventually, I decided we should just start on it because there was nothing else left to do. The whole rural area was finished, the whole rest of the town was finished, so I put some scaffolding here to kind of get a shape, an idea in my head. It didn't really work. I had a shape but no ideas, and I just went ahead with it anyway, and it ended up really looking quite good. We have a lot of crisscrossing beams under the water here, which I think tie it all together. We have some texturing on the wood, which I think gives it a nice character. We have this whole little shack here, which I think just ties in very well with the story of the place. I think it makes some sense, and I really like the look of it. But of course, the main feature of the dock is this boat, which really actually went through quite a few iterations before I was happy with it. But now that it is as it is, I am really happy with it. We got another super duper booper scoop here. But if we go through here, you can see there's quite a few details and stuff that happen. There's like that chimney there. There's a shutter over here, and those were all kind of just added in a little bit randomly at first, but I think they all like tied together to make a really nice boat. Now this was the last thing that I actually ended up building on the server, which kind of gives it a neat little section in my brain of like the most modern thing. So I'm happy with it the most and everything. But really, there's other builds in the town that are a little bit more significant. And I guess that kind of wraps up everything in the build. That was really the last thing. There's a few things we didn't talk about, I guess we can talk about. There's this bridge and the seawall, which I built really early on, because, you can kind of tell that they're built like completely out of stone because I only had stone at the time. I didn't really have many other resources. There's certain details to both of these that I would change now that I'm kind of happy with leaving, because they're just kind of been here forever. There's certain details to this that I like. There's certain details that I don't. But I think there's even though there's a room for improvement, I'm happy with how it is for now. The seawall has these street lamps on it because I was concerned about mob proofing everything. But other things include like just the fact that it's all stone bricks is kind of weird, but it makes sense. I wanted a nice visual barrier between the land and the sea, and a seawall was a nice way to do that. There's other things that are pretty old, like this bridge for the rural area. Or we're not talking about that because that's part of the rural area. We'll talk about that next episode. There's trees, which we'll also talk about in the next episode. I don't think I'll be talking about trees much in this one. I think they fit more in with the other one, but I wanted a visual barrier that looked natural between the town and the vanilla terrain. So you have some trees that kind of transition into vanilla trees, and that turns into vanilla terrain in a nice way. So there's different things like that all over the place. Of course, the whole thing is mob proofed, but that's pretty much all the little details to talk about in the town. So that's pretty much all there is to talk about. I mean, of course, the whole idea of it, the reason why I built all of this is because I wanted first I wanted a place to put my villagers, and I felt like building a town of some kind would be smart, and I was also just inspired by a few things that happened in real life, a few things that I saw, some things I experienced, and I wanted to build a kind of downtown style area. I wanted to build a kind of rural area around that, and I didn't want to build a realistic depiction of an American small town. I wanted to build a romanticized version because in real life, this isn't accurate. This isn't what these places are like. This isn't what a town this size would be like. There's, for instance, bathrooms, and there's no bathrooms in the town, so it kind of just wouldn't work functionally. There's cars that you have to consider, even in places like Mackinac Island, which are isolated and don't really have cars. There's still kind of cars for law enforcement and stuff. So they're even in the most car-free places in the United States, there's still cars to be considered, and the streets here are way too narrow for cars. There's different things like that that really just wouldn't work in a real city in the United States or anything like that. And I didn't want to build a realistic depiction. I wanted a very romanticized idea to be presented here, and I think I achieved that pretty well. There's certain things that I would change, there's certain things that don't make sense, there's certain things that do that I don't think need to be there, and different things like that. But I think all in all, it was a fun project. I think there is, of course, more to do. There's the whole rural area to talk about next episode. But for this episode, we're done. We're finished. So I guess we're gonna do the outro now. Thank you guys all for watching, and God bless.